This is quite a difficult thing for me to do. And I've gone through lots of different options, and I've employed a cheeky hyphen as well to make it 3 words. But I would go with numbers behind decision making. I don't think there are any people in Wales that aren't affected by the work that I do. The size of my job, I think, is very large and varied. So on some level, I think everyone in Wales is affected by it. There are, I think, 3.17 million people in Wales now, as the latest population estimates showed. And I think that they're all affected by it in some way. That includes the First Minister of Wales, children in school, people waiting for treatment or being treated in hospitals. They're all the kinds of people that my work is interested in. The eyes of the world could be watching, but it's also really rewarding to see like the things that you do being used, because that's ultimately what we want, isn't it? It's about getting data and statistics used by people. I'm pretty sure I have such thing as an average day, but if I do, it probably involves a lot of meetings. So I might be talking to colleagues that also work in the same organization as me to understand how my team's work can help them. So, what kind of data or analysis do they need? How can they understand the decisions that they're making, the kind of impact they have on different groups? So how they affect people of different ethnic backgrounds, or people of different sexual orientation, for example, or different genders. I might have a meeting with a minister maybe to explain some new statistics, or make sure they're aware of what new information is available. Or I might be speaking to other people across the UK who work in the same sort of area that I do, so that we can share ideas on how we can improve the way we collect data or the way we communicate it, for example. I am the Chief Statistician for Wales. I work for the Welsh Government. I would love to say that I get to spend a lot of time hanging out with spreadsheets, but sadly, I think those days are behind me now. But I do still try and dip into a few spreadsheets, a few formally when I get the chance. But I do spend more of my time talking to other people in meetings, and maybe passing some of those more interesting bits of analysis back to my team to do. Yeah, so when I joined the Welsh Government, a lot of my roles were actually doing the analysis. So I joined in the school statistics team, where we did school performance and attendance figures. So every year we'd be looking at how many pupils in Wales got 5 or more GCSEs at particular grades, or how many pupils are absent from Wales in a particular year. So a lot more of that number crunching, thinking about how we kind of manage the data to be able to get the analysis we want out of it, writing statistical reports to be able to communicate those findings across a whole range of different topics. But as you get kind of further and further on, you get a bit less hands-on, but there's still lots of opportunities to do those kind of things, if that's the thing that interests you. One of the really important roles of a statistician is being very clear on how you can and can't use data. And so we have a very important role in communicating that to anyone that then is going to go use it in another scenario, so that they don't do things with it that they shouldn't do. Sociology, English and French for A-level, which is quite some interesting choices. I might not make the same choices now, but there were things I wanted to do at the time. So I then went on to do a psychology degree in Cardiff, which I really enjoyed, in part because I really enjoyed the kind of sciencey analytical elements to it that I experienced through my A level, and I wanted to keep doing those kind of things. I think it perhaps makes me aware of the other kind of perspectives that people might bring. So rather than just thinking about my own view on something, you know, how might someone else respond to this kind of information? Absolutely, and you know, the job doesn't stop when you've done some analysis and maybe put it out there in a report. The important part is then getting it into the hands of the people that need to use it and making sure that they know how to use it properly. Initially moved back home for a little bit. So I'm from the Cotswolds. So I went from Cardiff back to the Cotswolds for a couple of years where I did a few temporary jobs working for an IT distributor, which was not my strong point, I'll be honest. But I think it's really useful to have had some of those other experiences while I figured out what it was I wanted to do. And I then joined a graduate fast stream scheme for statisticians, and then made my way into working for the organisation that I do now. So I think if I went back and picked my A levels again, I think I probably would pick some slightly different ones. I might do maths, or I might do biology, something a bit more kind of scientific and analytical. But I would definitely keep some of the ones I did anyway. You know, things like psychology, for example, and sociology. I think those social sciences kind of give me a bit of a broader perspective alongside some of the more traditional sciences and maths. And I think that well-rounded kind of package of A levels would set me up really nicely for the role I've gone on to do now. So there is definitely a lot of statistics within psychology, and that was one of the things I really enjoyed about the degree and why I ended up doing what I do. And I definitely think that an A level in maths would have helped me with that further. You don't have to have an A level in maths to be able to do it, but I do think it would have kind of given me an extra level of preparation to take into that psychology degree. And I guess you kind of start it, you're kind of already walking and then running rather than having to go from standstill to running. That is a good question, is it? So why is statistics important? I think statistics are kind of a window on the world. I recently described data as being like a torch, and if you shine your torch in particular places, you can see what's going on there. The same is true about data. If we're collecting data on a particular group, we can learn lots about that group, or you know, that kind of event, or whatever it is we're collecting information on. If we don't collect it, we're kind of in the dark there, and we don't know what's happening in that particular part of the world. So when I work in things like the Welsh Government and we're thinking about the decisions we need to make, we need to have access to the right kind of data and statistics to be able to make those decisions, to know that we're making the right kind of choices, that we understand who's going to be affected by those decisions. Otherwise, you know, there could be quite serious consequences to making the wrong decision. So I think it's really important to understand about statistics, to understand what's happening in the world, but also for our own kind of personal decisions as well. And I think the pandemic has been a good example of that, where the availability of data has helped people to understand maybe their own personal risk, you know, what's happening in their area, and has helped them to take the right kind of decisions about, you know, whether they go see family, or the kind of protective measures that they might have taken. So I think statistics, you know, without any of that, we wouldn't be able to do any of those kind of things. So within statistics, I think we've got a pretty good balance across gender. I think that probably maybe gets less so as you get into the more senior positions. And I've certainly found myself on plenty of occasions being in meetings where I am the only woman in the room, or the virtual room as it's been for the last 2 years. So I think there's definitely some improvements we can make there. And you know, thinking about for example, women from ethnic minorities or disabled women, there are even fewer of those. So there's definitely lots of room to go, I think, lots of progress we can still make. Although across the profession as a whole, I think we've probably got an okay gender mix. Climate change, I think, will become an increasingly important part of our work. So at the moment, we have analysts that work on things like understanding our greenhouse gas emissions, how you model a pathway towards net zero, where are you looking to reduce those emissions, and what's the best way to go about doing that. Understanding things like impact on biodiversity and nature, We have a team who have led a housing conditions survey. So we understand things like the energy efficiency of all our buildings and where we might need to target support to be able to improve the energy efficiency of them in future. So it will increasingly, I think, become a more and more important part of the work of statisticians and other analysts in government as well. I think I get stuck all the time on things. You know, one of the things I talk about a lot is that I don't have the answer to everything. And sometimes it's easy to think that as you kind of get more senior or older, that these things become easier, but they don't. If anything, they become harder because sometimes you have to deal with harder problems. So I think one of the ways that I try to find my way through these kind of things is involving other people. I think, you know, we're really lucky now in that you can quite often Google something and someone's done it before and they can help you find your way through it. But also, I really think it's important to draw on the experiences and the different perspectives of the people around me. And I think collectively, you can use that to help sort of find your way through things that might be a bit difficult to you to start with, but together you can kind of make some steps forward to solve that. And I think breaking it down into, you know, kind of manageable chunks. Sometimes the big problem is a bit too scary and daunting, and you have to think, well, what's the next step then that I have to do to achieve that, rather than focusing on the big thing you're trying to do at the end of it. But in my professional life, I think the pandemic has definitely been the biggest challenge. There was so much attention and clamour for data that was quite a fast pace to keep up with. Some people might joke that in the civil service we're not necessarily used to working at a very fast pace, but I think we've definitely proved that wrong over the last 2 years, and trying to keep up with that demand from both, you know, within government and public has been a real challenge. I think everyone has really risen to that challenge, and it's been really rewarding to see you know, data, statistics, analysis, and evidence being used in such a high profile way. But it was certainly a lot to keep up with at the time. And that then sets expectations about data and statistics in the future as well. So I think that's something we're going to have to continue to keep up with. You know, the expectations and the bar are really risen. So how do we make sure that we're kind of rising up with that? I think I would offer advice to people to go with their gut. I think sometimes we get a bit too caught up in doing the things we think we should do, rather than the things that we genuinely enjoy or are good at. And it's easy to be overly worried about what other people might think of your choices. So I think my advice would be to be a little bit braver and have confidence in your own choices and your decisions, and not worry so much about what other people might think of them.